Namaste. Welcome to our continuing talk course on Introduction to Indian Psychology, where so far we discussed what is Indian psychology and how it as a paradigm is different from the Western model of psychology. Today we will start with what are the basic assumptions of Indian psychology. So when we talk about the basic assumptions, like I told you in the last session, that when we are talking about paradigm, we have to ask the three questions. What is the object of inquiry? What is reality? What is our relationship with the object of inquiry? What is my relationship with the reality? And how do I study it? These are the three questions that we ask. So when we talk in terms of reality, how does Indian philosophy or Indian knowledge systems perceived reality? So like most of us know, modern science perceives reality as something that came out of Big Bang. You all must be aware of the theory of the Big Bang. How after this Big Bang, matter was created, matter somehow developed on its own, and from matter then evolution began, from matter to water, and how there is an evolution from living non-living entities to living entities that we study in chemistry, largely elemental chemistry. However, this theory still is very fractioned. Where did the Big Bang come from? We don't know. So these are the kind of questions we need to ask. The Vedas inquired these questions long back. What is the nature of reality? One of the fundamental assumptions that they started with is reality cannot be constantly changing, because if it is constantly changing, then how is it reality? Thus we have this concept or this understanding that the ultimate reality should be ideally something which is unchangeable, which is not constantly changing with time and space. Is there anything like that? In the Vedas, it is called the Brahman, and the attribute of the Brahman they call as Satchidananda Brahman. What does it mean? Sat represents truth, truth existence. Chit represents consciousness. Ananda represents bliss. Thus, Satchidananda Brahma refers to that truth which is conscious of itself, and in its conscious awareness it manifests, or out of its bliss manifests the entire creation. This is the ultimate truth of the Vedas. As the Isha Upanishad declares, Isha Vasyam idam sarvam yat kinchit jagatyam jagat tena taktena bhunjita ma grid kasya siddhvanam. All this is for habitation by the Lord. Whatsoever is individual universe of movement in the universal motion, by that renounce thou shouldest enjoy. Lust not after any man's possession. Know that Brahman to be the truth. To enjoy in that space, in that consciousness of the Brahman, is what the Isha Upanishad talks about. When moving from this understanding of Satchidanand Brahma, there is another definition which is used in the Vedas to define the Brahman, where they use the attributes of Satyam, Ritam, Brihat to define the Brahman consciousness. What does Satyam, Ritam, Brihat stand for? Satyam means complete truth, or the ultimate final truth, not the relative truth. Ritam represents the right order or the correct order. Brihat means utter wideness. One of the intentions in which I believe it was written, or in my understanding, it's a very beautiful thought, that the totality of the truth cannot be expressed in its complete order or in its rightful order until and unless there is utter wideness in the being. Hence, Brahman is illimitable and infinite. Even when we conceive of infinite, we have to think of a diagrammatic representation of infinite, and then we can conceive of it. The Vedas said, hence it is inconceivable, but it is something which can be experienced. How? We will know further. So how does this illimitable infinite consciousness leads to this whole creation where you and me in our finite beings are talking to each other, are using a screen to communicate? How does this whole manifestation of the finite creation come out of the infinite? The Mundaka Upanishad uses a beautiful analogy to describe how the infinite creates the finite. As the spider projects forth and draws back its threads, as plants grow on earth, as hairs grow on the body, so does the universe emerges from the imperishable being. This is what the Mundaka Upanishad talks about. The same way out of which a plant grows from earth, from the illimitable earth, a limited finite being emerges. Out of a spider, its threads emerges. In the same way, out of the conscious Brahman, the conscious truth, the entire reality emerges. The reality or the universe in which we understand it emerges out. Hence, the Vedas do not call the creation as false or as an illusion, which on a later date many other schools of thought like the Buddhist or the Vedantins called the world as Maya or illusion, that there is only one truth and rest everything is falsehood. The Vedas, they don't have, or the Upanishads, they don't have this connotation. Rather than they say that this world is also true, that world is also true. However, that is a greater truth because it is not constantly changing with time. One interesting thing that you would like to know about this concept of Sat or truth that we discussed. In Sanskrit, we have a term for truth called Sat, but we don't have a truth for falsehood. So in English, we usually talk in terms of truth and false, right? So in Sanskrit, you have a term for truth which is Sat. The word used for untrue or false is Asat or Anrit. You will often find in the Vedas the term which is used is Anrit, thereby indicating that the truth which is not in its rightful place becomes a falsehood. It helps us understand a lot of psychological difficulties from this perspective or this lens. The recent idea of dialectics, which talks about multiple truths existing coexisting together, perhaps is based on this idea that at the level of relativities there are multiple truths which are existing together, and the truth which is not in its rightful place at the right time becomes a falsehood then. But once it is kept back or it is positioned back into its rightful place, becomes or regains its throne of truth. Next, we are going to talk about how when we use this analogy of the spider weaving its web as the infinite bringing the finite world into place. The Upanishads don't just stop there. They give us a very detailed structure and understanding of how does this happen, what is the process of it happening. There we have the understanding of the 4 levels of consciousness, which some of you might have read in your books as the Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti and the Turiya states of consciousness. Now, usually when people speak of these states, they refer to the individual consciousness and how it moves from the 4 states of being. However, when you read it in the Upanishads, it is not so much in context of the individual being, but they are talking largely at a metaphysical level of how the entire reality is shaped. So hence we will try to understand it not just at an individual level right now, but at a universal, at a more scientific, cosmic level of how out of the infinite, illimitable Brahman, this material world comes out. So the Upanishad talks about the 4 states, the Taittiriya Upanishad talks about the 4 states of consciousness, and it says that out of the illimitable Brahman state is the Turiya state. We refer to the transcendent state where there is no experience per se. The Brahman in itself is conscious, yet it is not experiencing something out of it. There is no ripple of experience. We will go not from the inside out approach, but more from an outside in approach. We will talk about from the 4th state of consciousness, which is the Jagrat Avastha or the wakeful state. The wakeful state is when the consciousness is completely directed or exteriorized in its awareness. What we are usually ordinary waking consciousness is the term which is used for the Jagrat Avastha. That doesn't necessarily means that once you go to sleep you have gone to the different states of consciousness. It is just an analogy used. Human beings in general, they even in a state of dream or sleep, they are largely at the very surface state of consciousness because they have not developed the other states yet. So the wakeful consciousness is this most superficial consciousness that we are aware of. So in terms of matter, how you are aware of the book and its outermost limiting structure is the Jagrat Avastha of matter itself. The second state is called the Swapna state. Swapna state largely refers to how different ideas are construing the world. So a particular, if you look at this book, the book has many ideas which construed it, not just what is written inside it, but the color, the frame, the rectangle, the idea of a rectangle as a shape for the book, the number of the hardness of the pages. All of these are ideas which are constantly shaping our reality. That is what is meant by the Swapna Avastha, which has at a very subtler level the prototype of the objective reality, but not the complete objective reality formed as we know in the outer materials space. The third is the state of Sushupti. Now Sushupti differs from the dream state in the sense that there are no formed ideas here, but there is the ripple of experience. The first ripple of experience comes from the state of Sushupti, which also is called the state of deep sleep. So like in deep sleep, you are not aware of yourself, you are not even aware of the dream. There is no dream per se in the state of deep sleep. However, your consciousness is there somewhere, we don't know where. Even the most prominent neuroscience studies cannot tell you where you are at the state of deep sleep. That is what is referred to in the Vedic or in the Upanishadic text as the state of Sushupti the entire cosmos has. So one, you have the gross material level, behind it you have the subtle spaces or the subtler realities. Beyond the subtler reality is still a more subtler reality where there is existence of non-duality or the principles of energy still working out, not at the most gross form that we understand, but at the more subtler levels. And behind this is the state of Turiya, where the Purushottama or the Param Purusha sits. Is what you know in the Puranas you will see the Vishnu lying in his Sheshnag in the Mahasagar, in the Vaikuntha, which is the Mahasagar, and in his state of sleep is conceiving the whole worlds. So the sleep is still the deep sleep, and in the consciousness of Vishnu, who is himself the Brahman. So when we are talking about Vishnu, till there we have to understand that it's still the deep sleep state, because there is a division of Vishnu and the Brahman till that space. But in the consciousness of Vishnu, where he is the Brahman, there is no division, and that is what the Turiya states refer to. And Turiya then means transcendental or a space which can only be experienced, explored through experience. You can't really talk about the Turiya states. That's what the Upanishads tell us. You can still have words to express the first three states of Jagrat, Swapna and Sushupti, but you cannot express the state of Turiya. Now the reason I told you that all of these are the states of consciousness of reality, not just the individual reality but the cosmic reality, is because we understand even the physical laws deriving from this particular context that we just talked about. I gave you last time an example of a battery, how within the battery you have the subtle force of electricity, which you can only understand when you have plugged it to a point or you have plugged it to an electrical device, and then you become aware of electricity. Now behind electricity, of course, there are other forces also playing out. We know from physics that behind electricity has by default magnetic principles as well. So electricity and magnetism largely go hand in hand. However, magnetism is a much more subtler principle, right? Behind that is the principle or the fabric of space and time, which is in which the electricity, the force of electricity is moving. Behind this space of behind this weave or the structure of space and time, does anything exist? Modern science doesn't know, but the Vedic or the Upanishadic text says that yes, there are yet subtler forces which are working behind in the deep sleep or the state of Sushupti, and yet the most subtlest come from this state of Turiya, which very few people have experienced, some of them being Ramana Maharishi, Sri Ramakrishna, Paramhansa Yoganand, and of course Sri Aurobindo.